Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Scale with Joy Summit. I am so grateful to be sitting here with Russ and Mika Perry. They are the real Russ Perry. And so Mika and I felt like we needed to relabel our titles so that it went with his because, he started the trend and we're just following it. But beyond that, they are an incredible power couple. They're an entrepreneurial couple. Russ is the founder and CEO of Design Pickle. Maybe you have used them before. You've seen their ads in their newsfeed. But what we're going to share with you today is the story behind that story. And I'm so excited for you to listen in. So welcome, Russ and Mika. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
So if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your backgrounds and then how you're working today as a couple.
After you, Mika
Perry. Ladies first,
Ladies
right?
first.
All right. Well, I'm Mika Perry. I am a former stockbroker, actually, turned elementary school teacher, turned professional organizer, turned blogger and podcaster now. So I work solely in the online space now. And I used to run a professional organizing company here in Scottsdale, but it was under a kind of a licensed brand, and I grew that quite significantly. And that was my first real taste into entrepreneurship, and where I found out that that's where my passion and heart was. And the funny thing is that Russ over here had been an entrepreneur for about, at that point, Russ, like 8-9 years of our marriage. And even when we're dating, that was kind of, I knew that that's how his journey was going to go. And back then I just kept saying, why can't you have a 9-to-5 and the stability? And
really saying that?
Oh yeah. Yes, 100%. Because at that point, my experience was corporate America.
Yeah.
And teaching. And so it was very stable. And I also didn't really know what entrepreneurship meant. To me, it sounded like you try a bunch of different things and see what sticks. And not necessarily like you are the business owner and eventually CEO and founder of something bigger, which is what was Russ's plan down the road.
Yeah.
But at the time, and you'll hear a little bit here, is that we had a lot of stop and go, a lot of failures, and a lot of uncertainty and insecurity too. So working through that was big for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for having us, Laura. The one anecdote to put into that story is I quit a really great job at my dream company to become an entrepreneur. I was working actually for Apple at the time, and to get a job at Apple, it was the second time I had a job with them. Once was in college, and then I got hired again after college. I mean, this literally was the best. This was my job. Like, I was working for the company that I had always been like enamored with my whole life. And I remember coming to Mika as we were dating, kind of like, I just don't think this is for me. And which I couldn't believe I was saying that, but I had kind of a few side hustles going on with graphic design in particular, and knew that was less about the design work and more about that strategic problem solving that comes with being your own business owner, and was able to leave that company and really give it a go with running a creative agency. And when Mika says there was a lot of failure, she's not joking. They're mainly mine to take ownership of them, and built up my first creative marketing branding agency for almost 6 years or so, and ended up closing that and partnering in like a rebirth of it, if you will, with a partner in Argentina, and tried more traditional advertising agency work. And that was a great experience overall. I learned so much about business, and I think a lot of what I do now in the international scope that we have with Design Pickle was extracted from that agency. But ultimately, I couldn't get it off the ground. There weren't profits. Mika and I, there was a famous or infamous Christmas, the credit card Christmas is what I call it, and it was just like, why are we what is going on? What is all of this work and sweat, literal tears and challenges challenges in our marriage that ended up transpiring throughout all that, only to be left with like no profits, not negative profits when you're using credit cards for things. And sadly, I had to close the business. I know, Laura, you have a similar, story of having to walk away from your life's work, at least at the time. And that's what we had to do in 2014. And I can't tell you how hard that decision was, simply because we were like 2 years out of crazy, we had a hard time in our marriage in 2012. We'd gotten through that. And then I'm coming home to say, oops, I'm unemployed. I closed my business. I voluntarily closed this business. What are we going to do? Man, but Mika really stuck through it. I mean, at that point, she was like, we'll get through it. We'll figure it out.
Mika, what was happening for you at that time? Like, what was going through your head?
Well, at that time, Russ, had just mentioned we'd gone through a really tough part in our marriage, in 2012. And so we were kind of coming out of that. So I was ready for a little bit of like stepping into something a little bit bigger and greater and taking a risk and kind of transforming our lives purposefully and like intentionally. Like, you know what? Everything we just did was terrible. So like, let's start new. Let's have a fresh start. It can only go up from here is a little bit how it felt. And I was happy to see, when I thought that Russ looked relieved. He didn't seem too like sad that he closed this business. It was almost like this giant weight off his shoulder. And after we had unloaded a lot of our marriage weight on our shoulders and worked through that, then I could see that he had also offloaded something else that was weighing heavily on him and clearly not working. When you're not turning a profit, obviously there's a bunch of warning signs there. And to say, to see him admit to that and want to make a change was just a continuation of what we had been working on in our marriage.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I know, Russ, you took some time off, right?
Mm-hmm.
After that period to kind of think about what was going to be next for you. Now,
Right.
Mika, were you working outside the home at that time, or were you guys kind of going through that together?
Yes, actually, that was like at the height of my professional organizing career. So that's when I was like working with a business coach. That's when I had a team of about 6-7 organizers. I had 2 lead organizers. I was like running full speed ahead. And then Russ is kind of like working through his stuff and figuring out.
I was living a very nice consultant life after I closed the business, like no employees, no schedule, no office rent to pay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, at the flip side of that is that once Russ offloaded that, the past agency, he was able to support me as I was realizing my professional goals and my dreams. And had he had been, kind of in his muck, I don't know if he would have been able to do that. And it was really helpful because he was a huge help to me in realizing, what I wanted to do too.
It's really hard for both people to be hitting the gas pedal at the same time.
It is. Yeah, it can be. And there's definitely times since then that we both have. I would say like right now we are both hitting the gas pedal kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
We're both, thinking of growth in all different areas of our lives. But because we've had all that experience now where we kind of took turns, we've found out what we both needed in our roles and our personalities, both, just in our personal lives and also as business owners, what works for us and what doesn't. And then so now I think there's a really good synergy there.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would any kind of tip you would provide to somebody who's in a similar position, that maybe it's 2 entrepreneurs trying to figure out who's going to go, who's going to, release the gas pedal a little bit, and how to navigate that?
Russ?
Yeah, well, I almost think that so let's get clear. Mika and I in 2012, we went through an affair. That was a huge, huge issue, obviously. Now we have, our podcast, first episode of our podcast has dives into the details. So we're going to, if you want to listen to those details, we're freely share it there. It's too long for this interview, but we developed ninja level communication skills throughout all of that around a very heavy personal topic. Now getting into the business stuff, it kind of almost seemed lighter or easier. I mean, we were really proactive in communication. We were really clear with that question of like, well, what do you want? I mean, Mika's challenged me many times with that question, and I with her, like, what specifically do you want? So as a result of our personal growth and counseling, which was mission critical and getting through a lot of that, professional counseling and coaching, professional coaching, we had like created a new way of engaging in our, 8th year of being together. I mean, it was like this level up, if you will, of our relationship. So the business challenges we tackled with the same strategies and not always perfectly, but that heightened level of communication. And I will say, and I don't know, Mika, if I've told you this before, when Mika stepped into the entrepreneurial space, it was like I understood the secret language that she never really cared much about talking. Like I was bilingual in entrepreneurese.
Yeah.
But like no one at my home spoke it except for me. And so when she stepped into it during all this time, it was like, oh my gosh, let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about this. Let's talk. Yeah. You want to talk about time management? I am all in. And that was a huge like connector for us. Mm-hmm. We weren't working in the same businesses. Like I would help her. She's helped me plenty. But that was a common co-creation thing, which we strongly believe is essential for couples, is like you have to be creating together to continue to grow. And kids don't count. Like kids are, you create them in like a moment, in a fraction of the time, and then you got this job the rest of your life. So like this is like fun creation with it. And that was this other new thing in that time that was happening. So the communication skills, the common language of entrepreneurship. And then I think, like Mika said, the third thing was the solidarity that we'd gotten through this really heavy thing. Now let's move on with this new chapter of our life.
Yeah. And even if we had gotten quote unquote through the worst, there was still like, it wasn't like we were done and our marriage is going to be fine. It's like we learned some of the toughest lessons that we had learned through Russ's affair and also with surrounding sobriety. That was a huge factor in a lot of our lowest points. And so, now we know what that can look like. And of course, we've learned through that. But for me, I would say one huge thing of a couple working together, and even actually, if you're not in a relationship with someone, but just even by yourself, is to take care of you and take care of your home and take care of those immediately around you first, and then your business will reflect that. It's often the other way around. Like you think, if I invest in my business, if I become successful there, if I learn all the skills and show that I am worthy in my business, then my family life will be better. I will be somehow healthier. I will be happier. And that is certainly not the case. And that's what we learned. That's what we were trying to do. We were trying to be successful outside, all the while realizing that like it all started with us.
So much good stuff there. So Mika, what would you say now that you are on the outside, now you're on the inside, to somebody who says my husband or my wife doesn't get it? They don't get it. They don't get this entrepreneurial thing. Hear it a lot.
I do too. I hear it a lot. And I think it's hard because one of the biggest things is just patience. Patience and communication. And if you sense that your spouse wants to be in on it a little bit more, then include them somehow, find a way. And if not, then just be patient. Don't expect that person. You can't force someone to care and you can't force someone to be interested. So if it's not there, then find all the other ways that you can connect over something. Then you can keep your business and your entrepreneurial life, so to speak, somewhat separate, not completely. But if they don't want to be involved, that's okay. But one thing that really helped Russ and I is learning our love languages. We've even learned our kids' love languages.
Yeah, I did that too. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. It's such a really easy tool that we still think about now, even when we have disagreements. Russ and I actually just had a weekend of disagreeing and it really came down to our love languages were not being met.
Yeah.
So, I will add too, Laura, Mika was on the I don't support you entrepreneurial wagon for a while. So she was in there, and one of my key coaches, his whole thing was, look, stop talking about the greatness of entrepreneurship and start just getting results. And anyone in the space of entrepreneurship is kidding themselves if they're not focused on the ultimate end game of a for-profit business, which is like dollar profits. Like, you want to actually have an excess of value that you've created as measured by money and dollars. And, you use that for goodwill in yourself and your family and tithing and all of these powerful things, charities. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to stop talking about this, and I'm just going to start being committed to the results of the business. And that that was the best advice I received in, probably ever, because it showed me, look, like, there's a lot of people who will go through the motions of being entrepreneurs, but they're not really committing to the end result of it, which is something to then leverage into expanding yourself and your family and however you measure that. And I specifically remember it was 2016, and I was just like, Design Pickle was young. It wasn't by far as success as we measure it today, but I was just like, I just gotta focus. This must work. I have to get this. And I had micro targets. I kept meeting every month, and that was like the secret language of getting Mika on board was there was results to show from it. So we took our first ever like summer beach vacation ever, and in 2016, and it was like amazing. And it was paid for by the money we made from the entrepreneur thing. And so
amazing. Who knew?
So it's, that was the other day. I mean, for anyone watching this or listening to this who has a partner or a spouse that isn't on board, there might be some hard reflection to say, where am I not actually getting results, and how can I change that?
Yes, poorly worded, helpful feedback, probably, right?
Exactly. That's a great way to spin it. Poorly worded, but helpful feedback.
Yeah, when you get criticism, you have to kind of think, is it criticism or is it poorly worded, helpful feedback? And I love Brooke Castillo's podcast. She's a mindset person. And she always says that your spouse's only job is for you to love them. And that's for somebody who's like an achiever, like we probably are, and all the listeners are, sometimes you might have all these expectations for how the other person should be showing up. And sometimes I'll have that conversation with myself. Like, my husband's only job is for me to love him. That's it. And that's been helpful for me.
I like that.
Now, did you, I know. And sometimes it's that simple, right? Like, probably everybody's listening is very smart. They tend to get ahead of themselves. I'm sure, the three of us are that way too. Sometimes it kind of simplifies it, right? The other thing I'm curious about is a lot of people have tough stories. They have tough stories. Your tough story was within your marriage. Some people's tough stories within their childhood, or maybe they experienced it while scaling. They may have experienced betrayal. That was something that I really struggled with. Earlier today, I recorded Marshawn Daniels Evans, and she had to call off her wedding the week of her wedding because she found out her husband or her fiance was having an affair. Lots of stuff going on, right? At what point did you decide, you know what, we're going to be vulnerable with this story and we're going to talk about it? Was that a conscious decision, or was it something that just kind of happened naturally for you?
It was conscious in that Russ wrote a book about it. So there was no going back after that.
With a lot of permission and conversation.
Yes, with permission. He didn't just surprise me with a gift all about our struggles. But yeah, the book was like, I think that was
The Sober Entrepreneur, by the way.
The Sober Entrepreneur. That was definitely cathartic for Russ to write and get that out. That was also like it's a final healing process, I think, of writing that book, which in turn has helped others, which I'm so proud of. And then after he did that, there was a point I actually kind of made it be known. I knew that it was going to come. It was going to happen because Russ had now started talking about it.
Yeah.
On his side. And so I knew I had to eventually, especially also being kind of in a public online space,
Yeah.
and people starting to follow both of us. And then I actually got the courage to share. Actually, it was from going to a church group, and someone had spoke about it. It was like a mom's group, and I took that as like God's sign. And so that afternoon, I came home and wrote the blog post and like closed my computer screen and then like went. And so the few days after following that was just a ton of outpouring of communication of like, this is something people don't talk a lot about. And that was the whole point. My social media feed is pretty much like really pretty pictures of organizing. And I purposefully was like, our marriage was like over and we like saved it and we brought it back and we did that. And so go read about it.
Yeah.
And since then it's been great. It's been my favorite part is to still keep sharing the organizing and the positive and do everything in a really positive way, but then talk about things like addiction and affairs and the depression and all these things in a way that's like, hey, we don't have to always be negative about this stuff. Like, let's acknowledge it in a truthful way and see how we can grow from that. It's not the end of the world.
Yes, there's a lot of freedom in that.
Oh yeah,
very much so.
And that's another reason why I wrote it is, living a life fully in the light without any secrets. Like, you're the most powerful person in the room, and that is something that is not everyone obviously goes through what we went through, but there are always challenges people have. And if you show by example that you're willing to dive into the hard stuff, it's going to encourage others to do the same at whatever level they're at. And I knew from our experiences that this was going to be a travesty because statistically speaking, we're an anomaly, to be able to come out of this on the other end. So, but we wanted to stand as a beacon of encouragement that it is hard, but it is possible. And if we can impact one person, either in the story around our relationship and our marriage or sobriety, which, both Mika and I have chosen that path for different reasons, then great. If it's one person, now I get messages every week about that impacting people. And there was zero business strategy. This is not a lead gen book offer for Design Pickle. I've spent way more money and time on this than I've received. And it was my mission, and that was the way I was going to help make this experience positive. And Mika's done the same. She's chosen that same path.
Yeah. And also like the way we came to these struggles in our lives was because we were stuffing everything down and not talking about it. Mm-hmm. We were lonely in our marriage. We were not living together in many ways. And so I know that is a heartache of people who go through similar struggles, is that they just feel lonely about it. So, so part of our mission is just helping to alleviate that.
Yeah. And I'm sure all the struggles in entrepreneurship layered on top of that could create an isolation as well. Totally. So moving into Design Pickle. So I'm like calculating this as you're saying this. I'm like, this wasn't that long ago. Mm-hmm. Like all of this was not that long ago. And then you went on to scale. So if somebody's in your position that you were in 3 or 4 years ago and they're kind of like looking for that light at the end of the tunnel, right? You grew Design Pickle significantly in a short period of time. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it started with getting my house in order. I mean, that was the secret. That was the secret, was like, I worked for 8.5 years on trying to scale a business, not realizing that I had this huge energy leak in myself, at home. Like, there wasn't this connection and this foundation with Mika and then our family. So how was I ever going to build anything big when my foundation wasn't set? And we rebuilt our foundation. I mean, quite literally, like, got out the shovels, dug a new hole. We built a new house that we now live in. That's brand new, that we joke it's called the house that Pickle built, because it's like all from that. But for me, focusing on the relationship was the key to scaling the business. Wow. Because then I had purpose and connection that mattered, and that was fuel for me to grow from 0 in revenue in January 2015 to, we're doing over $1 million a month now with our revenue. So it's like, it's incremental, and I'm so blown away by the growth. We just made the Inc. 500 list last week. Fastest growing company, one of the fastest growing companies. But like, that is because I know like my home is covered. I mean, Mika and I are solid. We do have our arguments like the other weekend, but we're real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I dig into just like, if somebody's in that moment right now where their business is not scaling, right? And it's an inside job. And everything they're doing, all the hires, all of the people that are coming in that aren't working out the way that they want, and all of the stories that tend to happen when we're scaling. What are some of the things that you might help them with to really realize this is an inside job, but I don't know where to start?
Inside.
Like
Go
inside yourself. Well,
yeah.
So in my training, and I do one-on-one coaching and training too on this, based off what I've learned, you always want to start with where you have the most locus of control. And so business is where we have the least amount of control. It's counterintuitive. Like, we think like, oh, I show up, I can do this, I can create this marketing, but we have the least amount of control.
Yeah.
Our bodies, our physical bodies, and our mind, in that order, bodies and mind, is where we have the most control. And it's not easy, but this morning I went and I swam for half an hour with the coach because I'm working on my physical health, which affects my mental health. That I can control easy. I either do it or I don't. Like, there's nothing outside, granted maybe like a car problem, and then I could ride my bike even to get to the pool. So where we get mixed up is we pour all of our energy into things we have the least amount of control on and ignore what we have the most amount of control. But you have to invert that, and you have to focus on yourself first, like Mika was saying, your body and your mind. Then you take a baby step into that others category, and that's your family, your spouse, and then your teams, and then your business is the reflection of all of that. So it's hard. It's easy to say, and I know it's hard to practice, but people who are having the business problems, I just say, just take a break and focus on you for a little bit, and you'll have this miraculous discovery that, wow, once I start taking care of myself, which is easier to do, my business starts falling in line.
And I notice this shift even, every day for me. Why we talk about morning routines and night routines so much, like at least I do. You do too, Russ. And we do on the podcast, is because that's, especially as a mom, as a parent too, it's how I find more space in my life for myself. I think a lot of people say, well, I don't have time for self-care. I don't have time to take care of myself. We have to create that time. And the way to create that is by going through the things that you do have control over. And especially in motherhood, raising kids at the same time as growing a business is really challenging. And it can seem like you have zero control in life. And I think one of the things that's really taxing as a parent is when you can't predict anything. Everything seems chaotic. Yeah. Like, it's just you're in a reaction mode all the time. And so what has really helped me is I go through the motions of routines. And that really helps me to gain clarity, instantly switch like my energy and where my thoughts are at. I can, like worry and anxiety. And even like over this weekend, I was starting to feel like, oh, I have so many things I need to do and this isn't going right. And I got discouraged by seeing, other people's success, and I'm not doing that, even though I want to do that. And then I just kind of go through like what I know is going to help me. I really dove deep into my night routine yesterday to take care of my body and my mind. I have all these like ritualistic things of like of scent and sound and feeling, and just creating just like what I want my life to be around me. And then your thoughts kind of follow. So you just kind of do the actions of like the mindset that you want to be in. And then you'll notice that you'll kind of fall into that. And then that has like the trickle effect of like my kids start acting like a little less crazy, and my business starts getting a little bit more in line, and my creative motivation starts coming back. So
And I go to
definitely,
sleep much earlier than Mika does. So eventually I'm out of the way because I'm just sleeping. So
yeah,
I'm not causing any more problems.
yeah.
That is such a beautiful sentiment, and something I you don't hear that much.
Mhm.
Is that I think you're right. Like when things feel out of control, we look outside of ourselves. We look at the
Hmm.
outside world. We read the news on our iPad, like obsessing about what could happen to our kids, right?
Hmm.
Instead of the things that we actually do have control over, and that's the
Hmm.
relationships we have with ourselves and the ones around us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a tough realization. It was really funny. I was listening to Amy Porterfield's podcast a few weeks ago, and she was saying how she saw Dave Ramsey speak live for the first time, and how he had said, if things aren't basically like, if things aren't going the way that you want them to your company, like look in the mirror. It's you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And she goes, and when I heard him say that, I said, you shut your mouth. And she said, and then the more I listened, the more I realized, oh, it is me.
Yeah.
It all does come
It
back to
is.
me.
Hmm.
And it made me laugh because that was the first thing I heard when I heard him say that too. And then I realized.
Well, and I want to add, like, there's one simple thing that I did early on, and Meek and I do it now, is to help with this process. And that's like really literally getting clear and writing down what it is you're looking for in the day, that quarter, inside your business. And like, it's like that question, that simple but hard question, what do you want? That, being afraid to answer that or avoiding those answers, you're going to feel out of control because you're not going towards anything. You're just sort of going through the motions of life, but there's no defined destination. So yeah, you're going to feel at times lost or stressed or overwhelmed. And for me, like even before this podcast, like I'm so crazy about writing that's like even in like the next hour, the next, like for this podcast, what is it? So that I'm on track. I have a feeling like there's some guardrails on the road that are keeping me in line. And that to me is like one of the most practical strategies for folks when you're feeling this feeling. And then it becomes like this solution, just you said with Dave Ramsey, like what he said, like the person in the mirror finally, like you kind of know what that person wants and you can start helping that person get to that destination.
That's beautiful. And I have to say, from the outside, right? I'm listening to you and I'm like, they are so full of wisdom. But you learn these the hard ways,
Yeah.
like you don't come out of the womb with this level of intuition and in knowledge and understanding and self-awareness and self-acceptance. It's like it's something we train ourselves, and we usually find it in the valleys, not
Yeah.
the peaks, unfortunately, right? Fortunately
Yeah.
or unfortunately.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's one reason why we continually try to share it. And for example, why we started our podcast, Good to Be Home, was if we don't take time to reflect on it and like take a peek in the valley or pull back the curtain of the valley,
Yeah.
then it's that moment's lost. And we grow just as much from sharing that content as we hope others grow.
I'm sure. Yeah. And it's so encouraging because there might be a lot of people who are in the valley right now that are not feeling joyful about what is in front of them. And seeing your experience turn into such a beautiful outcome is really inspiring. So it's just about time for us to wrap up. You have a way in which people can really think through their home productivity, right? That's available underneath this video. And I wasn't sure, whose brainchild that was. I'm kind of thinking Mika, but I'm not sure. I don't want to undercredit you, Russ. But would one of you mind just speaking to what people can enjoy by clicking on that opportunity?
Yeah. So this is a productivity and time management kind of cheat sheet. What Russ and I love to do is kind of make things simple and easy to do and make things really practical, especially really big thoughts and ideas and topics. And like we mentioned before, action is really important to us. Like once you start taking action, like that's when the momentum comes. So this cheat sheet is meant to help you achieve that. 2 resources linked there are some of our 2 most popular podcast episodes on some of our daily habits and strategies like time blocking. So that'll kind of get you started on our podcast. But in our podcast, Good to Be Home, we do talk about all sorts of topics: parenting, marriage. I'm a stepmom. We have a 14-year-old as well, and children together. So even that. And then we love travel, so sharing travel tips. And then organization. I love organizing, so we share that. So really it is, our tagline is about balancing business and life. And that's exactly what this podcast is.
Well, people need it. I know I'm really excited to download it myself. I think every entrepreneur who is scaling and wants to be joyful while doing it will benefit.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank the two of you for just sharing your story, sharing your wisdom, sharing so much of yourself. I know that so many people are inspired and excited about what's next for them because of what you shared. And also, I'm going to encourage all the listeners to check out your podcast for more great tips.
Awesome.
Thanks
so much for having us, Laura. We really appreciate it.
Yes, great to see you again. And thank you so much, Mika.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.